When they plow their fields and sow seeds in the earth, when they care for their wives and children, young Brahmins find riches. But I've done everything right and followed the rules of my teacher. I'm not lazy or proud. Why haven't I found peace? Bathing my feet, I watched the bathwater spill down the slope. I concentrated my mind the way you train a good horse. Then I took a lamp, went to my cell, checked the bed, and sat down on it. I took a needle and pushed the wick down. When the lamp went out, my mind was freed. So that's a poem attributed to Patacara, who we'll speak about later. And it's from a collection of poems called the Therīgāthā. And these are poems of the very first Buddhist women. So this is 2,500 years ago. They were all originally written in the ancient Pali language. And they're thought to be among the most ancient examples of women's writing in the world. So we'll get to Patacara a little bit later. But first, good morning, good Sunday morning to everyone. Greetings to all you Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and kind of keeping with the theme of Patakara's story, welcome to you future corpses. So this is our Sunday program, and special welcome to those of you who are new to us, here for the first time. Thank you all for the gift of your presence. And as is our custom, we pause to acknowledge our Native American heritage and our American genocide. Here we remember the Northern Chumash people and remember that they walked these grounds way before us. They're still walking these grounds. Rōshi Kizan, my teacher, provided us some words for this. It's almost a prayer. I think of it as a prayer. So I'd like to acknowledge and pay my deep respect to the Northern Chumash people, the Yapitutu Yaptihini people, their elders and ancestors, past, present, and future. I acknowledge and offer deep respect to this Northern Chumash land and the water that supports us as we're gathered here right now. And I invite you to join me in that acknowledgement, that respect, and that gratitude. I recently read an article pointing out that Native Americans in our country tend to die much earlier than white Americans. The median age at death was 14 years younger, according to an analysis they did with the 2018-2021 data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And in South Dakota, the disparity is even greater. It's 22% difference. And this is really stood out to me. That's South Dakota is where the Lakota tribe lives. And this is a tribe that we have, with the Zen peacemakers, that we have worked with for many, many years with the Native American bearing witness retreats that we do every year. So the factors contributing to this, they say, are higher rates of chronic disease, lack of access to health care, socioeconomic conditions, and historic trauma. So this is my first Teishō. And our first Teishō here at the San Luis Obispo Zen Circle. So in a very un-Teishō-like manner, I'm going to speak to that a little bit before we get into our koan. And I thought about this, and remembered Roshi Ryodo telling a story. And he was with Maizumi Rōshi, that was the founder of the Zen Center of Los Angeles. And he was with Maizumi at some gathering, and Maizumi gave his spiel, a little talk, a little Teishō, I guess you'd call it. And then Zen Master Xuanzang was there as well. So he was the first Korean Zen master to teach in the West, and was founder of the International Kwan-Un School of Zen. So it was his turn to get up. He got up before the crowd. He raised his staff. Finally, in the back of the room, somebody started clapping. And as he raised it higher, the whole crowd broke out with applause. And then he stepped down. You're not going to be so lucky. There's another real famous koan where the same thing happens. The Zen master gets up in front of the crowd and leaves. I think that's a really good Zen teaching. So can I do that? Not today. So Teishō, so what's this all about? We do Dharma talks all the time. We have a clear statement of principle or points of Dharma that you're presenting, a clear presentation of what the Buddha and other ancient masters would talk about. Talking, sometimes adding contemporary masters, and then you bring it all in the here and now. So this word literally means presentation of the shout. And it's also, like show means to recite or proclaim. Te means to offer or put forth. Teishō. Now, if you've ever heard some talks from Japan, we had some Japanese Zen masters at ZCLA one time, and they came in and they were doing Dharma talks. They were literally yelling. And Toshin, were you there? It was like the 50th or something. And they're just screaming as they talk. I won't be doing that. So these, they're also sometimes called encouragement talks, often done during sessions, sometimes a couple times a day. Oftentimes they're spontaneous. And it's meant to help listeners connect with the Dharma in spaciousness and the silence of Zazen. So they're not so much about explanations or the imparting of information. And when you listen, oftentimes you're told, don't try to pick up every word, don't try to logic, figure this all out. Just sit there and let the words wash over you. Oftentimes a koan is used, and we're going to do that this morning. So it's more of a presentation of insight than an exposition of factual knowledge. Many times when you'll see during sessions, as people are listening, they're not always doing like direct eye contact with the speaker. They're just sitting there, just allowing the words to wash over them. I know for 25 or 25 years, I've watched Rōshi Yoku as she listens, and she is always just eyes down like in Zazen. And in our tradition, Rōshi and Yoko have taught us that basically it's a sensei and senior students give Dharma talks. Rōshi gives a Teishō. So that begs the question, so what's a Rōshi? And that's complicated in our times. And the different traditions kind of have different definitions in it. See if I can find out my notes here. Yeah, the direct translation, Japanese, old teacher, old master. And, you know, the old teacher part, I can connect with. I went to the Princeton Dictionary of Buddhism, which Fukuan, I think you've just recently got, I've had for a number of years. So again, literally means old master, an honorific typically used in reference to a senior Buddhist teacher or monk, sometimes interpreted to be a contraction of the compound Rodaishushi, elder teacher of the tradition. In the Japanese Zen schools, Rōshi is a technical term used to designate a senior teacher who was authorized to offer spiritual guidance and to hold higher ecclesiastical positions. I don't know what that means here in our group. And it's a little different with the Rinzai and the Soto schools. Oftentimes, I'm told, like with the White Pluma Sangha, and that's kind of the group that's affiliated with the Zen Center of Los Angeles, with the teachers there, and in other traditions, Soto traditions as well, they will have, you know, kind of a rule of thumb, where if somebody's had Dharma transmission, or you've been an independent Zen teacher for like 10 years and you're over 65 years, you can call yourself Rōshi. Our tradition has both Rinzai and Soto. So the koan collections that we deal with, that we work on, come from the Rinzai tradition. And it's said the Rinzai tradition, you become a Rōshi when another Rōshi gives you what's called Inka. And that's what happened with Rōshi and I. But things are really changing as Zen has been moving into the West. Inka Shome. And it means you've completed the entire koan curriculum and that you have transmission. So what does all that mean? I don't know. And maybe that's a good place to start. So we'll all find out together. I just know that the morning before I received Inka and the morning after, when I looked at the mirror, there was still the same old skin bag looking back at me. So together we'll figure out what it means. So on to our koan. Patakara's presence of mind. So this comes from the Hidden Lamp, story of awakened women, 25 centuries of awakened women. And it goes like this. In a single day, Patacara experienced the deaths of her whole family. Her husband, her newborn child, her older child, her brother, and her mother and father. She tore off her clothes and went mad with grief. She wandered naked in circles for a long time, until she stumbled into the place where the Buddha was teaching. When she came near the Buddha, he said to her, "Sister, recover your presence of mind." At his words, she regained her sanity. She told him why she had gone mad and begged for help. He said, "I'm not a person who can help you. For countless lives you have wept for your children and loved ones. Your tears could fill 4 oceans. But no child or loved one can be a source of refuge or hiding place." Knowing this, a wise person walks the path of awakening. She bowed down and asked to be ordained in the Buddha's Sangha. She practiced diligently. One day she was washing her feet in a bowl of water, and that's that poem that I started with, and poured some water away. She saw how the water went a little distance and then soaked into the ground, completely disappearing. Then she poured out more and noticed that it went further before disappearing. The third time she poured out even more, and it ran still further along the ground, but then it also disappeared. She thought, that is the way it is with human beings. Some of us die as children, some in middle age, some in old age, but all die in the end. The Buddha knew her thoughts. He appeared in a vision in front of her and said, Patacara, all human beings die in the end. So it is better to see the truth of impermanence for even one moment than to live for 100 years without deeply knowing it. Patacara completely awakened. She became the greatest of the women teachers at the time of the Buddha. So I want to talk a little bit more about the story, open it up a little bit, explain some of the background. So Patacara, a young girl, was born in a very wealthy family, and she was also extremely beautiful. So the family was, mom and dad were trying to protect her, so they kept her away. I heard in one of the translations I read, she was kept in the 7th story to keep, the suitors away. And then there was an arranged marriage with a family of equal status. But Patacara had fallen in love with one of the servants. And she didn't want to do this arranged marriage. So she escaped and went away with this poor farmer, and they went to a distant land, far away from where she had been raised, and he was farming on a plot of land. And they were very, very poor, so she was doing the menial tasks that before the servants had done with their family. Well, she gets pregnant. And then it's often the case in India, you go to your parents' house to deliver a baby. And so she was begging her husband, I really want to go back to my parents' house. Well, he's kind of freaking out because he's saying, well, if I go back, they're going to be angry at me and maybe even kill me. So he's trying to talk her out of it. She's not going to have any part of that and decides to leave anyway. So she does. He comes home from work and finds out that this is what she's done, so he runs after her. And he catches her. And they have the same discussion. Well, as it happens, she gave birth right there. She never made it home. So they went back to their land. Later on, she gets pregnant a second time. Wants to do the same thing. So she escapes again from the husband who doesn't want her to go. And once again, he comes after her. Well, there had been a huge storm, a huge rainstorm, lightning, thunder in their land. And he finally catches up with her. And she has the second baby. Well, he goes out to try and, cut down some trees to make some kind of shelter for them. So as he's doing that, they say in one of the translations that he's at an anthill and there's a snake there, and this is a venomous snake. The snake bites him, and it's so venomous he dies instantly. So she spends the night alone just with her two children. Both of them are young or boys. One's, of course, is just a total infant. And in the morning, she gets up and heads the direction that her husband had gone and finds him dead. So at that point, she still wants to go back to her parents. So she comes to a river, which is swollen because of the storm, realizes she can't carry both the children. So she leaves the older son on one side, wades across the river, and then puts the baby down on the other bank. And she's going to go back to get the older son. Well, she's about halfway back on the river, and this eagle swoops down, thinking that the baby was a piece of meat, swoops down and picks up the child and takes it away. Well, Patacara screams. And at that point, the son, who's on the other bank, thinks that's mom saying, go ahead and come on in. So he goes into the river, gets swept away as well. So she's lost her husband and both her children. She continues on toward the home and comes across somebody who has just come from that village, and she asks about the family. And this man says, don't ask me about them. Ask me about any other family, but not them. And she's persistent, and she says, no, I want to know about them. In the storm that had been so terrible, their whole house had collapsed and killed the father, mother, and their sons. So that is with the koan, she just goes mad, goes berserk. And can you blame her? And then, of course, the rest of the story, that she comes to the Buddha. Keep your presence of mind. So I was inspired to look at this story of Patacara because of one of our Tuesday study sessions. We're looking at the Vasubandhu's Yogacara, a practitioner's guide, which is by Ben Conlon. And in one of the chapters that we studied, he spoke of hearing this story told by his teacher, Tim Burkett. Now, he said he wept copiously. His heart cracked wide open by hours of meditation. So he was in sesshin when he's doing this. And those of you that have experienced long meditation periods or sesshins, retreats, probably know that feeling. He wrote, I tasted the raw pain of her loss as my own. I saw it in my own consciousness. I left that retreat with an opened heart, a newfound knowledge of my capacity to be with my own suffering, and a deepened sense of the vastness of my connection to all of life through the bond of shared grief. He asks, is this what causes us to weep at movies that touch our heart? When we touch into that grief? He mentions Brokeback Mountain. And when I read this, I was thinking back about the movie The Color Purple. Some of you may not be old enough to remember that, but 1985. And I can remember I was with my mom and first wife at the time, and I, broke out in tears. And this happens. This idea of losing everybody, You listen to the evening news, and at times that's exactly what's going on. House fire, one member survives, the rest of the family perishes. Car accidents, where the same thing happens. And I weep. Of course, I'm a weeper. It doesn't take much. But I thought about Ryokan, the poet, who I dearly love. And one of my favorite poems of his is thinking about the people in this floating world, far into the night. My eyes fill with tears. I was also reminded of Ernest Hemingway, who said, all stories, if continued far enough, end in death. And he is no true storyteller who would keep that from me. Another of my favorite Japanese poets, Issa, Kobayashi Issa, has a famous poem, "This world of dew is a world of dew, and yet. When he wrote that poem, 200 years ago, he had seen his mother die when he was 2, a stepmother who arrived to us, he said, whip him 100 times a day. He had nursed his father through his death of typhoid fever. And his first son died within a month. A second son also died within a month. And he had a daughter who actually made it out of childhood, watched her with pride, watching her grow up. And she contracted smallpox and died. From the Pali Canon, Buddha taught us the 5 remembrances. Ben also talks to this in some of our readings of Vasubandhu. I think this is like encapsulates Buddhism. Yet we have the 4 Noble Truths, we have the Eightfold Path, but these 5 remembrances are so powerful. Buddha said, I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape. And the 5th, my actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. Can you relate to any of this? As we get older, we confront death more often than when we were young. My own journey, my mom passed away in 2016. 3 years later, Dad passed. Dear friend, Jane Carcel passed in 2021. My brother in 2022. Sensei Koan, one of my very best friends, just passed away in October, last October. What if you lost every one of your family members? I've been thinking about Eduardo a lot. And Eduardo, so what if you lost Katya? And both your children. Mariana, Victor, and your parents, all in one fell swoop. So all of you, think about that. Can you weep with an awakened mind for those you love? Is there a place where suffering can't enter? Well, these koans in this collection, the hidden lamp, they have reflections given by women. In this one Patacara story, the reflection was given by Anna Prajna Douglas. So Anna is a co-founder of Spirit Rock Meditation Center. And she's in her 70s. Her teaching focuses on aging as spiritual opportunity. So she wrote, "Years ago, I was struggling with a personal problem, and I felt that my family and friends didn't hear me or understand what I was saying. So I asked the spiritual teacher, Byron Katie, to help me." You heard this story?
No.
I told her what I was struggling with. She listened intently and then suggested, "I will pretend I'm your friends. Now, you tell me what you want me to hear." "Okay," I said, launching into my well-worn tale. Katie listened patiently, and I've never met her personally, but I've seen many videos. I could just see her listening patiently. Eduardo is an instructor in the work, which is part of what Katie is involved in, Byron Katie. So she tells her story. "When I was through," she said with compassion, this is Byron Katie speaking, "Anna, we don't really want to hear it. We don't want to hear about it." That was it. Nothing real. She wrote, "I was momentarily stunned, and then my mind cleared. The burden of wanting to be heard lifted and evaporated. Someone was finally telling me the truth. No one actually wanted to hear my sad story. I could accept what Katie told me because I saw with sparkling clarity that it was true. Like Patacara, my mind was eased and liberated. From that day to this, I have never had to be heard on the matter again. Recover your presence of mind." This particular koan is taken from a section in the collection, section 2, called, in the hidden lamp, "Bring Me a Mustard Seed, Being Human." And most of us know the story of Kisagotami's The Mustard Seed, where she loses her child, also goes berserk. In that story, interestingly, the Buddha said, "I can help you." That's what he said to her. And then gave her the exercise of trying to get a mustard seed from any household that hadn't experienced loss or death. So he used a little different skillful means with Patacara than he did with Kisagotami. Skillful means, upaya, doing what's needed. And this brings up our three tenets. Coming from a place of not knowing, bearing witness to the joy and suffering of the world, then taking action that arises from not knowing and bearing witness. What's needed in the moment. So if you face this impermanence, what do you think happens? When you really embody this. I'll end with a quote from my own teacher, Rōshi Shogen. Letting go is the ultimate Zen experience. There is nothing that is permanent. Not you, the mountains, the rivers, nor butterflies. Just fully be the moment right here, now. You will find not impermanence, but you will experience eternity. So by design, I did a long talk so we wouldn't have a Q&A period. As we're nearing our bewitching hour. And oftentimes that's the case, I understand, with Teishōs. When we do talks at retreats, we don't have a Q&A. Usually on Sundays, we do. But I'm not giving you that pleasure. So we'll do a formal exit. Go ahead. The three. Yeah.
Numberless beings,
I vow to serve them. Inexhaustible delusions, I vow to end them. Boundless dharmas, I vow to practice them. Unsurpassable Buddha way, I vow to embody it. Numberless beings, I vow to serve them. Inexhaustible delusions, I vow to end them. Boundless dharmas, I vow to practice them. Unsurpassable Buddha way, I vow to embody it. Numberless beings, I vow to serve them. Inexhaustible delusions, I vow to end them. Boundless dharmas, I vow to practice them. Unsurpassable Buddha way, I vow to embody That's a wrap.